So in hand pushing, which is what we're going to work on today, we're trying to learn all the tricks to playing this game. The first trick, you might say, the first important thing about the game is your own center here. And we worked on this yesterday when we're doing our simple two-person exercise like this, and then with the two postures, push and ward off. And I said you have to first make your center capable of following the other person's center in a translational sort of way. You gotta, when he moves, you move. Now you have to learn how to deal with extension. Suppose his center doesn't move, and he pushes out with his hand. Well, if I do that, I've violated my rule. My center's moved away from his. But if he pushes out with his hand, and I resist, be careful, you're pushing your center a little bit. Don't move your center. I'll have to move with it. Just extend the hand. If I resist, that's bad too. So somehow I have to not resist. Do it again. I have to not resist. Keep changing. And I have to not move this point. So everything has to revolve around this point. The illustration with the shoe. This shoe does perfect taiji every time. Every time I kick it, it differentiates itself into a yin, a yang, and a center. Where I kick it moves away from my foot, some other part moves towards it, and some other part remains the fulcrum of this movement. So you have to initially make your body something that does this. The initial game is to produce a sort of physical object that does it. The later game is to be skillful enough so that even though you don't have a literal object which does it, your opponent feels that this is what's happening whenever he touches you. You produce, you might say, the illusion that this is happening. Now, the first exercise we did in the hand pushing, which we're going to do right now, was, as I say, to coordinate these centers. Now you have to make sure that when the person extends, don't retreat. You have to leave your center there, but still you have to yield. So we have 3 dimensions we have to be concerned with. An easy way to understand this is to understand that we have 3 axes of movement. We have this vertical axis. If he is to the right or left of this axis, I have to turn around it. We have this axis. If he is up or down from that, I have to respond this way. And we have this axis, which means if he comes from the side, I have to respond over this way. You can categorize most of the mistakes that people make in taiji by whether or not they destabilized their center when they did this kind of thing. I'll just show you some things so I can make, this is so I can make corrections more easily. Suppose he pushes me here.
Sideways?
Yeah, and I do this. Obviously I've made a mistake because it looks bad. But what is the mistake literally? Do it again. Now I'll do it one more time. Notice when I do the correct technique, it looks a little different. Now, you can define the center 2 ways. Center of mass as center of movement. If you have a good boxer, the center of mass is the center of movement. So a lot of the lore about boxing doesn't distinguish between the two. It sort of makes the tacit assumption that these are the same. But in fact, what happens when somebody's not a good boxer is the center of movement separates from the center of mass. And when that happens, you can describe it in one of 2 ways. You can either say the center moved, meaning the center of movement moved, or the center of mass was destabilized, or something like this. For instance, here, I can either say my center's moving, meaning the center of mass, instead of staying in the same place and having a good technique, started to swing back and forth. Or I can say the center popped up, meaning the center of movement, which was here, has suddenly gone up to here. So the terminology is sometimes confusing for that reason. I'll try to make it clear what I mean. But you should understand clearly that this is the mental problem. You've got to separate these 2 things. So it's much easier to feel one of these axes than it is to feel the exact center. So the best way to practice this is to put your mind on one axis or another and find that becomes very familiar. Then listen to the other one, and you'll discover whenever you put your mind on one, the other one starts to become more obscure. For instance, if I find a student is neutralizing very well this way, but he has no inclination to do this, and I make him aware of this, he'll say, oh, right, got it, go ahead. Fine. Now he's forgotten this. So by putting his mind from one axis to the other, it tends to, so it has to just sort of skip around. Then I have to say, no, you forgot this one now. Oh, right, and he'll do this one. So actually, it must be like a perfect combination of those two axes. And as soon as you move, it becomes the third axis too, because you are going at a different angle. So expect me to complain that you have forgotten one axis or another. And the way to make this simple and fast is I give them the names of elements. I call this the water axis. So if I say, you need more water, it means I feel sluggishness in your movement in this direction. If you seem reluctant to sink, I'll say you need more earth. This means, because it's sort of like sinking into the earth, this means really sung, let your ankles work and draw yourself down. It doesn't really mean, incidentally, that you need to get your center lower. It's not like saying you need to crouch. Remember, this is important. This is not crouch. But you need to make this change around the center, which will feel like the ankles flex, the ankles do, and draws you like you're sliding into the earth this way. If I touch you on the side and you seem double weighted in this direction, I'll say you need more fire on this axis. So this is much simpler for me than going this way, or something like that. So we have these three dimensions. Now let's take partners and see if we can play around with, at least first, let's start with just two of them. It's very obvious. Good. So the most natural push, first before we do this, let's add the other hand. We were doing this, right? The idea of this was quite simple. One person becomes a ball, one person becomes a stick. So when I push the ball should roll. The ball should not have any ideas of its own. It should do whatever I want it to do. So here, if he wants to keep pushing me this way, okay, I should keep turning this way. I shouldn't decide it's time for us to go back. It's his problem. So, but he should realize that he's gone way too far here. After he turns me to a certain degree, he should come back. See if I can turn this way. Okay. Now this always involves an extension from the body, because we're dealing with natural effect here. The natural way to attack someone is, well, let's say for anyone who has any amount of training, is not to do this. You approach the person first, then you extend, like this. So as the person approaches you, you neutralize his center. As he extends, that's when you use this, all these angles of neutralization. So you become like this very simple little toy. It locks into the opponent's center, it relates to it, and then whatever projection comes from that center, it goes around it, like this. It's your job to help your partner practice. The most difficult move to make is, go ahead and push. Double push. Yeah, is this one. That is this sinking down. So the most common problem of hand pushing is people have heavy hands. If your hands are heavy and unconscious, the actual direction that the person should go is like this. So I always tell my students, there's two things that you never want to do in boxing. Never predict the future, never read your opponent's mind. First of all, you don't know the future, and he doesn't know his own mind. That's the big problem. If people were always doing with their bodies exactly what they thought they were doing, then you could safely read their minds. But unfortunately, and this is interesting because the better the boxer is, of course, the more that's true. But especially with somebody who's untrained, he will absolutely think he's pushing you this way. But his hands will feel just like this. And he won't understand why you're not doing your part of the exercise. He's doing his, how come you're not doing like this? He'll say, no, in fact, I've seen beginners do this to each other. One of them will say, no, 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 do this, do this, do this. And then finally I'll walk up to the student who's giving all this instruction and I'll say, give me the push. And his push is like completely heavy. So you have to be clear that what you are asking your partner to do, you're also giving them the right physical indication to do.
One thing is they walk up and they do this, right? Like they're playing a piano. And they right away with the fingers.
A few more tips I have to give. Don't connect to your opponent with the fingers, please. Think of the bubbling well of the hand. The bubbling well of the hand, this very sensitive spot here. That's where you want to contact. And in fact, for the purposes of our exercise, and for most purposes, you want this bubbling well to contact the opponent's joint. The joints here. So let's just take partners. Yeah, Doesn't really matter. We'll skip around a lot today. So